game. But right now, let's get a little perspective from the visitors from the West Coast. We bring in our friend, voice of the Stanford Cardinal. He is Troy Clardy. Troy, great to talk again. Welcome in. And what's the vibe like out there in Stanford as you guys get ready to head east for the first time this year?
Yeah, great to be back on with you. Looking forward to hopping on the plane on Wednesday, spending an extra day, and then playing the game on Friday night and headed back to the West Coast. Hopefully Stanford likes to have a happy plane flight back to the Bay Area. We'll see how that goes. Mixed results for the Cardinal as of right now. A close loss that kind of got away from them against TCU in week one of the season. And in week two, Cal Poly and FCS coming up to town. And things kind of wobbled a little bit offensively, but they were able to find some things in the second half, mostly by defense and special teams. But the passing game was really terrific in the second half as well, en route to a 41-7 win over the Mustangs. So, mixed results for Stanford, but I think mixed results for a lot of teams right now. I mean, a lot of guys have, Stanford's only played 2 games, Syracuse has only played 2 games, and in some results, each of those games, I think for both those respective teams, look quite different, one from the other. Both teams coming off a bye week and looking to maybe establish a bit more positive consistency from here on out.
All right, here's an important question, Troy, which you may have absolutely no idea of the answer to. Adam Terry, who does the color analysis for the games for Syracuse, is a 6'8" former offensive lineman. So these are the things he thinks of when we think of cross-country travel. Do we know that Stanford has sprung for, the largest plane possible? He's worried about, offensive linemen, leg room on planes. He says that's legit, the biggest issue with some of these cross-country trips.
Well, I know, and I'm told, I think last year, for the most part, I think Stanford rolled with 737s, I think, for the most part. But they are going with larger planes this time around. But I think a lot of that is a function of this being a larger travel party this time around, because they're bringing more support staff. I'm not sure if this is going to be necessarily the case for this road trip, but, Stanford runs on the quarter system academically. First day of classes is on Monday. So certainly for when Stanford needs to head on the plane and head down to Clemson next weekend, I think you'll start to see more academic advisors and folks like that on the plane with Stanford as well. So yes, I mean, obviously, cramming, some very, very large human beings into a very small space, for 5-6 hours at a time is not ideal. But they are going to have larger planes this year for those reasons, because these are longer plane rides, and also because more people are coming, me included. How about that?
There you go. Troy gets to be on the plane, so that's good news coming across the country. Much easier to do that than having to connect through wherever the heck to get from out there to out here. But, you look at stuff like that. It can be a distraction. I guess it is what you make of it, right? How is Troy Taylor handling all of this East Coast stuff, which has never been a part? It's here. It's Clemson in a few weeks. Notre Dame's not unusual for Stanford. That's later in the season. NC State. How is he handling the idea of this being, the way of life now, as opposed to just a one-off situation?
As a head coach, you look at things not necessarily as challenges, but as opportunities, right? And I think a lot of folks outside the program are looking at this as a challenge. Oh my gosh, Stanford has to make 4 trips back to the East Coast this season. Oh my gosh, how are they going to do it? And I think a lot of those folks who are in that mindset, tend to follow programs that don't travel a whole lot, right? Where we're going 2 time zones away is a foreign concept. I think I saw where LSU, when they came out to the Rose Bowl and they came out to Pasadena to play UCLA a couple of years ago, that was their first road trip, their first road game in the Pacific time zone ever. So you get some of these folks who are saying some of these things who are just not used to seeing their college programs travel around the country. Cross-country travel is nothing new to Stanford. You mentioned the series with Notre Dame that continues hopefully beyond this year. We'll see how that goes. But Stanford's played all over the place, non-conference games all over the place. I mean, they've been to Army, they've been to Navy, they've been to Wake Forest, they've been to Northwestern and all sorts, Boston College. That's the longest plane ride I think you can possibly have in the continental United States, perhaps. So they've been all over the country already. This is nothing new to them. Stanford recruits nationwide. They don't just stick to one region of a state or one region of a country. Stanford recruits nationwide. Kids are used to having to get on a plane ride and travel a long distance to come to Stanford. And let's face it, for football, it's easier, right? I mean, it's not ideal. I'm not saying that this is ideal necessarily, but it's easier. You get one game a week, and that's all you have to worry about. You hop on the plane, you stay hydrated, you eat several meals on the plane. I'm looking forward to getting into that mode. And you play a game, and then you scoot out right afterwards. The real test is what happens to the baseball programs, the softball programs. They have to play 3 games a week. How is that going to work? Hoops. I'm waiting with bated breath, to see what the conference schedules look like for basketball. How is that going to look? So I think in a lot of ways the travel aspect for Stanford has been overblown quite a bit, quite honestly. Because it is easier for football to travel because of how it travels than it is for some of the other sports.
Yeah, that's a fact. Certainly compared to literally every other sport in this circumstance, even the other ones that charter everywhere, like the basketball. Yeah. I'm with you, Troy. I'm waiting on this basketball schedule. Syracuse, both their men and women have these Stanford and Cal road trips this year, and I'm just intrigued to see how that is going to be scheduled because they really haven't tipped their hand on it.
I've already told our men's basketball sports information director to get ready to have to clear up 34 different student journalists and make sure that they have room at Maples Pavilion when they come out this way for hoop hoop season.
Oh, Troy, they're all coming. Believe you me, they'll all be headed your way for that one. We got Troy Clardy, the voice of the Cardinal, with us here. As far as I've kind of found this, Syracuse played at USC for a game now. When was it? It's 11, 12 years ago at this point. And it's one of those things you forget like how many alums you have all over the place. There was a bunch of like Cuse alums at the game in the Coliseum. Like everyone's got alums in New York City, right? Like, are you expecting a contingent of Stanford alums at this game? Because, they don't necessarily get to have their team come this way, at least in the past, all that often.
Yeah, not necessarily, and it'll be interesting to see, how many alums, are in the building. Obviously, the fact that it's a Friday might potentially kind of damper things just a little bit. If this was a Saturday, maybe give folks a chance to get out of town on Friday evening and get into Syracuse. Perhaps that might work out a little better. I don't know, but I'd imagine the folks who are in the building will roll strong, will represent the Cardinal well. And, yeah, there are, a lot of different areas. Stanford alums are all over the country, all across the globe. I'd love to see Canada represented. Alec Manor, a Canadian himself, albeit from Alberta, and it's a bit of a ways from Alberta to Syracuse. But I think you get what I'm saying here. It's going to be a nice little chance, especially when Stanford heads. I know for a fact when Stanford heads to Clemson next week, there's going to be a lot of folks, including Stanford's quarterback, Ashton Daniels, who's from the Atlanta area, from Buford, Georgia, just outside of town. There's going to be a lot of folks who have had that game circled on their calendar who are going to be making the road trip, certainly to Clemson. And that's going to be a sight, and that's going to be a scene. I'm looking forward to being a part of that. But, I think folks, coming in, from the East Coast, from all different points, especially in the Northeast, because this is Stanford football's only appearance outside of Notre Dame, and I don't think anyone considers that the Northeast. It's more the Midwest than anything else. I'm intrigued to see what the Stanford fan turnout is a bit myself. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, no idea. Well, we'll see. We'll find out together coming up on Friday here in the Dome. And you mentioned, Clemson next week. That's 2 hours from Atlanta, so it'll be interesting to see what Ashton Daniels draws. So, all right, Troy, tell us about Ashton Daniels, a dynamic quarterback. What's he showing you this year as he continues to grow as a starter for Stanford?
Yeah, he's improvised well. And he's been forced to improvise well because some things have been in flux with the offensive line throughout the early portion of this year. But I think he's responded, for the most part, well to it. Missed on some deep shots against TCU, but was able to perform much better and be a lot more accurate against Cal Poly. Now, again, it is Cal Poly. There is that. But still, it beats the alternative. I'd rather be talking about him, going 19 and 23 for 221 and a couple of scores against Cal Poly than him not showing well and having a lot more questions and answers at this point. Certainly has proven himself as, a very capable passer, a guy who can make throws on the run, and a guy who can pick up yardage on the ground by himself. And, it's not that often where you see in this day and age, even so, a team being led in rushing by its quarterback. And that was the case, not necessarily with Ashton Daniels last year, but with the guy that you guys know relatively well, in Justin Lamson. He was Stanford's leading rusher last year. Daniels is Stanford's leading rusher right now with $118 on the ground, dropping 87 yards on the ground against TCU in the season opener. Now, mixed feelings about that. You like to see it, but you also like to see, some production from the running backs as well. Those are the guys who are supposed to be providing the bulk of the yardage for your running game. But we haven't necessarily seen that to this point, largely once again due to what's happening up front and how things are in flux with the offensive line. But Daniels, for the most part, has proven accuracy, has gotten better. His footwork has gotten better as his career has gone along, and he's putting more and more tools together as his Cardinal career progresses.
You mentioned Lamson, who transferred out there a couple of years ago after a very nice spring. It kind of threw us off last year when he led you guys in rushing, because we always viewed him here as more of a throwing quarterback than a running. With Daniels now, has his role, Lamson's role, kind of just vanished from what it was last year? It doesn't appear that it's the same, switching around whatever was going on last year.
No, not at all. He still has the same role as he did for much of last year. Right. The same packages. He'll come in and he'll try to bowl you over and get some first downs. That his teammates call him Lambo, and I think it's more because it rhymes with Rambo than because he runs like a Lamborghini. Because Lamborghinis have power, but they're more known for their speed than anything else. But you'll definitely in all likelihood see Justin Lamson taking snaps in situations, goal line, short yardage. He has improved his passing mechanics over the year. We haven't necessarily had a true chance to see that so far this year. In fact, he's only thrown one pass so far this season, and that went for a 2-yard touchdown to a young wide receiver, Ishmael Cece, against TCU earlier this year. So you'll definitely see Lamson in situations perhaps a little bit beyond. I'm not sure. We'll see about that. And he's fired up for coming back. He told us during the weekly press conference yesterday that he knows a lot of different folks. He knows like 7 of the 11 starters on defense. McDonald, the outside linebacker for Syracuse, was his roommate, Derek McDonald. So certainly he's looking forward to being back there. And he told me that besides Dinosaur Barbecue, Franchesca's is the spot.
Okay.
Specifically for their butter cake. So I was glad to hear that from him. So yeah, Lamson's looking forward to this.
Okay, that's a legit recommendation from Lamson. So he's not leading you. Franchesca's is outstanding for one, Troy. Usually I feel you get a little too full there to necessarily work your way towards dessert, but butter cake sounds boring, but their butter cake is excellent. So shout out to our guy Lamson. He lit it up in the spring game here. It's like highly ironic. Like the way last year developed for Syracuse, if Lamson hadn't transferred, he's probably here as the backup quarterback last year. The last month of the season probably goes really differently. Yeah. And Fran Brown's probably not the head coach right now. It's really weird how these things happen in college football these days.
Yeah. Butterfly effect, man. Yeah. Butterfly effect. How one small thing, and look, Lamson transferring didn't lead to everything else. That happened since. But certainly what has been, it is an intriguing little, what could have been there, I guess, in some respect.
It's just, a bunch of these things happen, of course, but it's like the one if this, that, and the other, it doesn't take you that long to connect it all. We got Troy Clardy, voice of the Stanford Cardinal, with us. Tell us a little bit about your other Troy Taylor, his second year as head coach. Well, what's he bringing here? Obviously, it was a big rebuild that he had to undertake starting last season. How does he feel the progress is going?
Yeah, he likes the depth. There's more depth. There's about as much youth this year, but there's more depth, especially at certain key positions. And he said, especially he's been harping on this year. It seems a bit more than he did last year. We'll go as far as our offensive line and defensive lines go, as far as they take us. So we'll see how that goes as the season progresses along. But he knew this was going to be a rebuild process, and there were certainly some green shoots from last year. Obviously, everyone points to the Colorado game and how Stanford was able to go into Boulder and preempt prime time. That was certainly fun. But, I think it's also more telling the fact that Stanford won three, actually had a winning season a winning record on the road last season.
Mm-hmm.
A tough gut-out win over Washington State up in Pullman, and the season opening win at Hawaii. So I think, you don't win games like that on the road, coming back from down 29-0, holding off a very good Cam Ward. We've seen what he can do already with Miami, and holding them to just 7 points on the road. You don't do those sorts of things, and I hate to use this term because I think it's overused, but unless you have the right culture in the building, and certainly Taylor has helped establish that. The guys love football, right? And if you come to Stanford, you've got school to deal with, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to love football, too. You have to love it. You have to love everything about it. And, the coaches, they like recruiting and all those sorts of things. They know that recruiting, is the lifeblood of a program, and they take it extremely seriously, and they've had outstanding success in that respect. But that staff isn't just about roster management and about, combing the transfer portal and trying to flip a roster, mostly because they can't do it that way because that's just how Stanford University operates. But they love football. They love developing guys. They want to make sure that kids are here 3-4 years and are developed to the fullest of their potential. So it's been refreshing to see those sorts of things and that approach brought in to the program as well. Still, offense is a work in progress. And I think right now, to this point, this team has largely been led by its defense and its special teams. But you know what? The whole program right now is a work in progress. Year number 2, and I think we're going to learn a lot more things about this program and where it stands right now than we did last year.
All right, last and probably the most important question, Troy, that many people have asked me to ask you today about the travel party coming east later this week. Is the tree coming with you? Everybody wants to see the tree on Friday night. Is the tree making the trip?
I do not know. I do not know if the band will be in the building because the tree is the mascot of the band. Oh. The tree isn't necessarily the mascot of the university. The tree is the mascot of the Leland Stanford Junior University Marching Band. I do not know if they have been let loose and are being allowed to head to Central New York at this point, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, look, if the tree was allowed to go to Paris, right? If it was allowed to leave the country and head across the pond, and it didn't do any diplomatic damage while it was over in Paris, for the Summer Olympics. I would imagine that if the band is there, the tree would be in Central New York as well. So, yeah, I got a lot more things. You keep giving me homework on things to look out for in this game. I like it.
Yeah, you can figure a lot of them out on the plane. The tree, legroom. I mean, lots to look out for, Troy. And we got your dinners taken care of as well. So all set up, man. But safe travel.
I'm ready to roll.
There we go. Safe travels out this way, Troy. Thanks as always for hopping on for a few.
No, appreciate it. Thanks, as always. Until next time, looking forward to it. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane, and go Stanford.
There we are. Troy Clardy, the voice of the Stanford Cardinal. Keep